Hello, Hopkinton, and welcome to HCAM's Hangout Hour for September 15th. This evening, we have two pre-recorded segments for you, one with our brand new fire chief and one with our town clerk. And I'm really happy to welcome now for our first segment, Fire Chief William Miller.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jim, for having me.
All right, and by the way, publicly, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It's very exciting.
And do me a favor, call me Bill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, Bill, before we even get to Hopkinton, before we even get to the chief, let's talk about you.
Sure.
Okay. So, where do you come from?
I'm from Oxford, Mass. originally.
Okay.
I started my career there as a call firefighter in 1986. My dad was fire chief at that point of the call department, yes. I am actually a fourth generation firefighter. I started with my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, who was in charge of blowing the trumpet up and down the street to alert the firefighters, and then he would have to go and hook up the horse-drawn wagons. So that was his job.
That's amazing.
It is. That was my father's grandfather, so that was,
wow.
That's where we started. And then I have a cousin that's a call firefighter as well, and then my dad, and then myself. And now it's going down in tradition as well, because I have one of my sons who's a call firefighter in Hopedale, so he's starting to get into the trade as well too.
Now, who is still alive? Is your dad still alive?
My dad is still alive, yes. Both my mom and dad are, yes.
Okay, so he must be pretty proud.
He's very proud.
Yeah, and of course your mom goes without saying.
Exactly.
Wow. All right, so you started in Oxford.
Yes.
Now, tell me what that was. Did you say a call firefighter?
I did. I was a senior in high school. Knew I wanted to get into the fire service, and they had a hard time getting people during the day because everybody worked outside the town. So my dad had worked it out with the school that I would carry my radio pager with me, and if there was a major incident, I was allowed to leave school in my senior year, and I'd go to the firehouse and go to the calls and mitigate them, and then when I was done, I would go back to school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It was really neat.
You know, now why? Is it because you're fourth generation, or what drew you to want to be involved?
I grew up loving it. So being with my dad all the time, going to the fire stations on Sunday mornings, going with them to calls, always seeing it, being exposed to it. They say it's a calling. It was definitely a calling for me. It's what I felt. It's what I always wanted to do, and I knew it. So I set my career path and my goals on becoming a firefighter.
That is really, you know, honestly, it's not, I was going to say great, but you know what? It's also wise, because once you find your calling, once you find what you're meant to do, work is a joy.
It is.
So it's wonderful that you're able to find that. So here you are, you're senior in high school.
Yep.
You're on the call fire department. And then what's the next step in your journey?
So I stayed on the call department for 8.5 years. And I said, all right, I want to get on full time. So I started doing some testing. And a local test came up that I did very well on. And I was able to get hired, and that was with the town of Southbridge. So I started my full-time career with the town of Southbridge in 1994, and I was there for 5.5 years, and was looking for bigger and better, to do different things, to become part of a department that was growing. I had a friend of mine who is now the fire chief in Milford, who I worked with at that time as a firefighter in Southbridge, and he's like, hey, you know, Hopkinton's hiring. I said, I'll give it a shot. And I came out here in 2000, and I haven't looked back. I've been here ever since.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow. So Oxford, then to Southbridge, and then here.
Yes.
Okay. And when you came here, did you come here as a full-time firefighter?
Yes, a full-time firefighter EMT. And in fact, at that time, my group of hiring, there was 4 of us got hired together at that time. We made the third person a shift. So Chief Doherty was the chief at that time. He had 2 people per shift, and with the call volume and the growth of the town at that time, which we thought was a lot, he said, I need this staffing. And the town said, okay, this is what you can do. And we were the third person assigned to a shift at that point.
Yeah, I want to talk about,
Definitely.
the needs. Now, what does it take to be a firefighter? Like, what do you do for training and teaching?
So today's a lot different. Back when I got on, you need your basic EMT and a knowledge of it, and then departments would send you to the fire academy. So today we hire predominantly paramedics. So most of our work at this point here is EMS work. So I would say 75–80% of our calls during the day are medicals, which is not a bad thing, but they're what we call multiple medicals. You have 2–3 calls at one time, and Hopkinton does see that. So get your paramedic, become a paramedic, and then most of the time departments will send you to the fire academy once they hire you, and it's a prerequisite for a lot, and that's a 10-week training program as well too.
Okay. Now, I was just trying to think, when you started, I mean, I'm sure when you were a call firefighter, but when you started in your career, was that pre-911?
Oh yes, I started in 1986.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yes.
So what was it like before then, and then when 911 came in? How did that change how you do things?
A lot of things have changed since that time, but they've also come around again in full circle. So things that we did back, we call it in the heyday or back in the old day, back in the early years, far as personal protective equipment, the way we fight fires, the way we respond to fires, the staffing that we use, all that had changed drastically. So our awareness was what we knew at that point. And then as we became more educated on our building construction, our surroundings, the way fires are burning hotter, they're burning different, why is our protective clothing important, all that rolled into it. And then 9/11 hit, the tragedy, and one of the biggest things that came out of 9/11 was the incorporation back into an incident command system. Incident command system has been around since the early 1970s and started in the wildland fires in California for accountability. But in my younger days as a call firefighter, we didn't have accountability. You would just kind of do what you want on the fire ground. You would talk to the chief, he'd give you an order, and away you went. So 9/11 hit, and Presidential Directive Number 5 came out from that time President Bush, and he said, we need to instate this again. So ICS was a very big factor for the fire service after 9/11. It's not the only thing that happened, but it was one of the bigger things that happened. Again, we looked at building construction. We looked at the way we were responding to calls and how we handle calls in these types of buildings.
You know, I find it really amazing because it's not, oh, you get the ring, you jump on the truck, and away you go.
No.
When I have seen the setup for the incident command system and the technology and the integration and like what you guys actually, guys and girls, females, actually wear when you're going in is like so different.
It is. It's a lot different. So the joke is when I first got on is we would wear what we call 3/4 length coats and hip boots. We didn't have bunker pants back then, and that was what you wore. And as time, again, as evolution evolved and time went on and we learned that firefighters were getting injured and burnt and we couldn't understand why, we realized it was the gear that we were wearing. So then we went to bunker pants, and then we went to different liners in our jackets, and then the whole ensemble changed. And then we went to Nomex hoods, then we went to PBI hoods, they're all protect our ears. So all that had changed, and even then the air packs we were wearing. I remember starting off wearing a steel cylinder for an air pack. Today, they're aluminum fiberglass wrapped. They're an aluminum cylinder with a fiberglass wrapping. So they're lighter. An air pack back in the early 70s, 80s, even early 90s could weigh in excess of 40 to 45 pounds. An air pack today will weigh 28 to 30 pounds.
Okay.
So those evolutions have changed. And you're right, Jim. The equipment we wear is totally different.
When you are fully suited up and you're going into a fire, like how much does it weigh and how bulky is it? Are you in like tunnel vision, or do you have good visibility?
You have good visibility. So you're actually adding about 50 to 70 pounds of weight onto your body, depending on what you're wearing for equipment. Like some people carry a lot of tools and equipment in their pockets. Air packs are pretty much the same, but you can get different options which may have them weigh a little bit less or a little bit more. So we've actually done this study. We're adding about 50 pounds to our bodies every time we go out the door with our full PPE on, putting an air pack on.
Okay. Do you still have the fire pole?
Yes, we do. We do have it.
All right. Now, you've been in Hopkinton 22 years?
22 years.
Okay. So just in Hopkinton, we talked about the ICS. And actually, if people don't know, could you just give a brief overview of what that looks like and what it does?
Sure. So ICS is called the Incident Command System, and it's accountability. So when we arrive at an emergency situation, we want to know where our people are at all times. And they have an accountability number. They'll report to their officer. The officer will report back to the chief officer, who tracks it on an incident command board. And it's basically you move where the people move, but they don't move unless they have an order. And once that order is carried out, they report back to the incident command post, and the chief will say, I need you to do this, or I need you to go to rehab and stand by. Depends what comes up next. And it's just a matter of knowing where your people are at all times.
Where is the chief?
Chief is outside the building, known on the front of the building or the A side of the building.
Okay.
And here in Hopkinton, I'm very proud to say that we stand out in the front, we set our command board up, we work very closely with our mutual aid chiefs, and we fill the roles of incident commander, which is done by the host community or where the incident is. Then you may have a safety person, you may have an accountability person, you may have an interior person. So all these roles are filled, and these people are talking constantly to figure out, is what we're doing working? Do we need to change our plan? Did we make good headway of it? Can we back this down? Do we need to escalate it? So it's a constant fluid motion until the situation is placed under control.
So everybody in there is talking back and saying like what they're seeing and what they're doing, and that's where you come in, and you kind of get a picture based on all their information, and then you direct where people go?
Exactly. So the firefighters would verbally communicate with their officers, and then the officer would report back to the incident commander and give that picture. We're making good headway. We have high heat. We have zero visibility. And then we make the decisions from there. Do we need to escalate it or de-escalate it?
Okay. So that's a major piece of equipment. And I'm curious, so over the past 22 years, right, what other tools in the fire department toolkit have come on board, like since the old days?
Thermal imagers are another great tool.
Okay.
So the thermal imager, again, helps us. People there's a big misconception that they see through walls. They don't see through walls. They're heat signatures, so they pick up heat signatures. They're temperature rated. So it's great. The first one I ever wore was in Southbridge, and it was a helmet-driven camera that looked like a fighter pilot helmet. And now we've come to where they're very small. They hook on your air pack, and you just pick it up and you hold it. So that's been a great tool in the toolbox. Apparatus change has been another big one. They've changed so much where the size of the pumps, what they can do. Then you work down to your equipment, your hose lines, your friction loss, the carrying capacity of each line. It's a well-oiled machine because people see a hose line come off the truck and they think that water comes out of it, and that's simple as that. The heart of the organization is going to be your pump operator at a fire or a major incident like that needs to make sure that there's water coming in to match the water that's going out, and that they don't ever run out because the people who are in the building are relying on that pump operator so we don't run out of water.
Right.
So it's a well orchestrated. So the equipment in general, Jim, in the last 22 years, from A to Z has changed. And it's continuing to evolve and change. And there's an organization called the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, that sets a lot of our standards on our equipment, our PPE, and every tool that we use on a daily basis. So all of that is constantly being changed, and they govern different standards and different requirements over the years.
Okay.
Like they put a life expectancy on our turnout gear. Our turnout gear, our full PPE, is only good for 10 years.
Oh, I see.
And then it has to be taken out of service. So they regulate things like that. And again, that's another change that we've seen over the years.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the thermal imaging camera. Like, is that for, I'm guessing, when you're inside a building, you point it at a wall and you can tell if there's a fire inside the wall because it's hot?
So the thermal imager is a great tool. It's used in what we call zero visibility. It's used if you have a smoke-filled room. You can't see your hand in front of your face is what we would call it. So you're like this, you can't see. Zero visibility, you're down on the floor, you're searching. It'll help us find a missing person in a building. It'll help you pick up a down firefighter who may be trapped or in trouble. It'll help you locate fire, especially in the zero visibility, because again, it shows the heat signatures. And that's what you'll see. You'll see the temperature change. The smoke will be one temperature, but the actual fire will be another. And same as a down firefighter. That temperature may be one temperature versus the temperature in the room, and then that signature shows the body of the down firefighter or a victim that may be in trouble.
I see. Wow, that's really cool.
It's neat technology.
So it makes me wonder. So I understand the technology and the techniques have really progressed and advanced, and you approach what you do differently. What about construction? What about the actual buildings that you have to know about when there's a fire in there?
So construction has been a challenge for us in the fire service for a very long time. I'll use back in the the mid 80s, even prior to that, we had what was known as legacy construction. It was built out of true dimensional lumber. It was a 2x4. It was a 2x6. Today, we're dealing with what we call modern construction with a lot of pre-engineered and man-made materials. Those pre-engineered and man-made materials are used with wood chips and glue and they're burning 2 to 3 times faster and hotter than a normal 2x4.
Okay.
So we would have a rule of thumb: a fire would double in size every 10 minutes. That's what we would used to teach and go by. You're looking at a fire is quadrupling in size every 10 minutes now.
Wow.
So it's growing 4 times what it did before. So a lot of times we get a reported house fire. By the time we get there, and our response time may be 3 to 4 minutes, the fire is quadrupled in size from the initial call.
So just like your personal opinion, don't you think they could make products that are more fire resistant and still do the same job?
Those are that's above you and I. Those are engineer questions, and I would say that we would hope that they're working on it. But we in the fire service looked at different ways, and one of those ways we're looking to help a resident as well as a firefighter as well as a building owner is through a sprinkler system. We have a residential sprinkler, you have a commercial sprinkler, and there's a couple others in between. But the goal of the sprinkler is to save life. So a residential sprinkler gives you time, the homeowner, the resident in a fire event, provides you enough of time to get out. It may not save your house, but it's going to save a life, and that's what it's designed to do. So we've adapted, and we're trying to work around these new modern technologies of man-made lumbers, pre-engineered beams, pre-engineered lumber, that how can we try to slow the spread of fire down, offer better protection for the residents until we get there, and we're doing that through a sprinkler system.
I see. Now, with the pre-engineered materials, where they're putting resin and wood chips and all that kind of stuff together, are there standards so that they don't create toxic fumes when they burn?
No.
So they can?
They can. Yes. One of the bigger ones that we're seeing today, and we ran into it in a neighboring community a year and a half ago, is the sprayed-in insulation, the spray foam insulation.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very popular. It has a very good high R value for both heat and cold. But the way it burns and the off-gassing it gives, it's very difficult for us to fight a fire in that type of building. And it will build up the heat, and it builds it up a lot, and it'll burn on the surface. And the smoke that it gives off is a dark black toxic smoke that was probably really not studied well enough in the beginning, but we know about it now, so we take every added precaution with our SCBAs and our proper PPE when we go into these homes.
So how do you know? Is it just by you look at what the smoke looks like and that tells you?
You can tell. There's an art called reading smoke. Different color smokes will tell you what's burning in the building. Yes, if you have really dark black smoke pushing from a building, you can pretty much guess it's into the structure itself.
Okay.
So with that being said, we're going to err on the side of caution. We know that where there's a potential this is going to happen, but a lot of times we don't see it or we don't find it until we pull a ceiling or we open up a wall, and then we'll find the spray foam insulation and we find it burning in another spot. So if we don't recognize it out of the gate right away, it will be to the point of when we're doing our overhaul operations or when we're physically looking for the fire. That's when we'll start to see this.
Right. All right. This is one more personal question.
It's
aside.
all good.
What do you think of the movie Backdraft?
For its day, it was good. And we'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. So now let's talk. This has been a really interesting. In fact, we'll probably have you back just to keep talking about this.
I will gladly come back.
Kind of stuff. So let's talk about you now. You have become the chief. And what do you think of your department and your community?
The department as a whole is, I can't say enough good about. There is such a good group of dedicated people that come in and give 100% every day to this community. Now, on top of that, I love the community. Like I said, I've been here 22 years. It's great to know the people. It's great to walk down the street and say hi and stop and talk with folks, have them come by, have conversations like we're having now. Hopkinton is a wonderful community. The organization that I am leading now, that I am very proud to lead, is another outstanding component.
You know, 22 years ago, Hopkinton didn't look like it looks now.
No.
I was just reading that we were the 7th fastest growing community since the last census. So it has, obviously there's been so much building going on. We're close to 20,000 residents now. How do you account for that as the chief? Like, do you have a map that keeps growing? Every day something happens? Do you know where most people, like how do you get a visual on what our town looks like?
So that's a really good question. So we have two components. The first one is we work very closely with the building department. The second one, we work very closely with the planning board. And then they confide in us, we confide in them. We talk about projects that are coming up. They may have questions. We may give suggestions. We may ask questions. They may give suggestions. It is a tremendously based working relationship between those organizations that helps us out tremendously. On top of that, we now look at our data. We're very data driven. So at any point we can tell you by running some statistics where we call them hot zones.
Yep.
So where's a core of our calls going to be? Where have they been for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years? What areas are a larger draw on the department? What type of incidents are we seeing in those specific areas? So all of that is being tracked. By tracking that, that allows us to look at our staffing. Are we meeting the needs of the community? Are we meeting the needs of the call volume? How many times were we not able to answer it? How many times do we have to rely on mutual aid? All that goes into building the organization to meet the needs of the community.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. I had no idea it was like so data driven, and you track and that's so cool.
If you think about it, Jim, every time a piece of apparatus goes out the door for a call, a report is generated. The officer does a report. The dispatcher starts it. The communications center starts it with the receipt of the call. And it's all time stamped. So we know from the time the call came in to when we were alerted, to when we rolled out the door, to arrived, mitigated it, returned, and got back into quarters. All that is data driven. Then there's all the material in between with the address, what the call was for, what actually the call was when we got there, how many people did we respond with, what apparatus did we respond with. That's on the fire side. Now we do the medical side, we do exactly the same thing. So we're able to track all of that data on a regular basis that we know, are we meeting the needs? How many times did we rely on our mutual aid communities because we didn't have the equipment, we were all tied up, other incidents were going on, so those all come into play.
Okay. Wow. All right. I'm going to ask you one chief question.
Go
'Cause
for
you're a brand new chief. So later on, right, we'll follow up on this. But from right now, from where you're sitting as our brand new fire chief, what are you excited to either take on or do with the fire department?
To continue to grow the department with the growth of the community. As I said, I've been here 22 years, you as well. We've seen Hopkinton grow. And to be part of that growth, words cannot express. To now be leading an organization that is going to hopefully grow and continue to grow with the community, that's more excitement for me than you can imagine.
That's great. And when I look at it, I think that both the police and the fire department do a really good job at interfacing with the community, at saying, here we are, and here's what we do, and if you have any questions, go ahead, come at us, and let's talk about it. And also, just your open houses, and you show what you got, and things. I don't know, the Central School, Marathon Kids School now, when my kids were at Central School, they used to walk down to the fire station and get a tour there.
We did it prior to COVID.
Yep.
We backed a lot of things down. Even this year, it's disheartening for me to say, but we're not even going to do our open house again this year. We've decided not to. We really toyed with it, and we're going to. Myself and Lieutenant Krause, who oversees our open house and does a phenomenal job, we really agreed, saying it's still, with the rise in COVID cases still coming up, we don't think it's the right thing to do, so we're going to postpone it for another year. But we're proud to open up our doors. We love when the community comes in. And I think you hit on it a minute ago, Jim. If someone has a question, they want to know what we do, how we're doing it, or why we're doing it, please come knock on my door. I'll meet you for a cup of coffee. We'll sit down and I will chat. Because I want us to be transparent, and I want the residents to know what they're getting for service and why they're getting that service.
Excellent. All right, so I got just a couple minutes left, and the first thing I want to ask you is, and I don't know, this has always been like something I think about. Water and electricity don't mix.
Correct.
How much of that is a concern when you roll up to a house that's engulfed in flames?
It's a big concern. The concern primarily for us is what we call the service line or the feed line going to the house that provides the power from the street to the house. Those are one of the things when we arrive on scene, whether it's the shift lieutenant or if I get there first, we do what we call a size up or a 360. We do a quick visual around the building if we can get to it. And one of the things that we're looking for is a power line that may be down. Inside the building is a little bit different. Sometimes it's hard to see those hazards in a smoke-filled environment, but we will call Eversource right away on a major incident and have them respond right away to disconnect the power to the house.
Yeah, and that has to happen before you can go in, right? 'Cause you have to be safe.
No, we'll go in.
Oh, really?
Even if there's a power, the feed line from the street from the street to the house is down, we'll put a cone or we'll caution tape it off, and we'll tell people stay away from that. Okay. And we'll find another avenue into the house. We don't hold that. We continue to go in and save the property.
I see. Okay. So now in our remaining time, tell me a little bit about the facilities and what do you have? Like you have like we have more than one fire truck in town.
Yes.
You know, like what do they do? Like what are some of the interesting tools that your building has?
Sure. So I think one of the proudest tools we have right today is our new ladder truck. We're very fortunate. Thank you to the community for supporting us. We have never had a brand new ladder. We've always had used ladders we bought used. The first one was bought by Dell. It was an old Milford ladder. They bought it for us, and then we had that for many years. And then we went without because that truck failed. And then when Chief Slayman became chief, we were able to purchase another used 1999 ladder truck that got us through 5 years. And then that started to break down and have some issues. And we went forward and said, you know, we really need a new ladder. So I'm very proud of the group for building the ladder. I'm very proud of it because it was built for Hopkinton. And I'm very comfortable saying there was time and effort put into this piece of equipment to say, how can it fit Hopkinton?
Yes. Yeah.
And we did it. So we have it's actually a Quint. It's a 100-foot rear mount ladder. It's got 575 gallons of water, 25 gallons of foam. It's got all the complement of what we call the pumper. So that runs out of headquarters. Also out of headquarters, it would be engine 2. That's another pumper. That's a 2000 E1 pumper. Behind that, we have engine 3, which is also a pumper / our tanker. That's got 2,700 gallons of water and another 350 gallons of foam. We have been staffing Station 2 during COVID, and we're going to continue to staff Station 2 for the foreseeable future. Out of that station, there's engine 4, which is a 2010 KME pumper, and ambulance number 1. So A1 and engine 4 run out of Station 2. Headquarters will run the 2 engines, the ladder, and the ambulance. Again, not all at one time.
Right.
Most of the time, it's either the ladder and the ambulance going out, and then if we have something significant, off-duty personnel will come back and staff the other apparatus at that point.
Okay. So that's really cool. In fact, one of our next conversations, I'd like to do an overview of all the capabilities that you have and like stuff that goes with it, because that's really fascinating.
How about we do it at the station?
Oh, I'd love that even more.
Let's do a tutorial. Let's walk around and I can show you what we have.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And like I said, thank you. Thank you so much. You know, there are people that I talk to in life, and I call them life changers because, you know, they're therapists and they're doctors, and they can change the course of a person's life. You're in the life-saving business, so thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Coming up next, on our next segment, we will be talking to our town clerk, Connor Deegan, so please stay tuned. And I'm back like I never even left you. As I mentioned, this segment, we have our town clerk, Connor Deegan, who it's been way too long, so we're looking forward to catching up with him. Hi, Connor.
Hi, Jim. First time back in the studio since COVID hit. I have to say, it feels awesome to be back in here.
Thank you. Thank you. It is really awesome for us, too. You know, we set up the whole studio to run remotely, and it's just so nice to be back.
Yeah.
So, but I'm really glad to see you again, too. You're looking very nice.
Well,
You're looking
thank you.
really good. I think marriage is treating you well.
I'm sure that my wife will be glad to hear that.
Good, good. So let's start off just generally, okay? Because what I'm interested to know is, how did you do in the town clerk's office surviving this pandemic?
It was quite the experience overall. Right from day one when everything first closed down, it was the next day that we were due to get all brand new equipment for the state election computers and all that. And so even though everyone else was closing down and working from home or just not doing anything at that point, I was still in there trying to receive delivery people and get things installed, and nothing stops for elections. So
Yeah.
that was 2020 was the year for it. So nothing really stopped for us the whole year.
Wow. So did you ever work remotely?
Only a little bit. There was only a few things that really I could do remotely. Certain meetings and certain licensing and things like that we were able to pull off remotely. But I spent most of my days in the office still. It was very quiet.
I was just going to say, it must have been so quiet in there.
I missed having all the people in there, whether it be all the other employees, but also the walk-ins of people you don't see all the time that you get to see just by happenstance because of just being at my office where it is.
Yeah. I was just actually at the senior center yesterday doing a shoot for a show, and I was thinking that, wow, I'm seeing these people again.
Yeah.
So very quiet. Were any other offices open? I mean, I don't mean open to the public. I just mean staffed during the pandemic.
So in the earlier days, almost everyone was trying to stay remote as much as possible, and then they, our health director Sean McAuliffe, who did a fantastic job. And I know it's not just him. There's a whole bunch of other people that worked on it really hard on that. But they did a great job of just rolling out a plan for how we were going to staff the building. And then our IT department helped to make sure that there were some people who could answer phones from home. And there was a live chat service. And, there was a lot done to try to make sure that it was as seamless as possible for people to continue getting the service they needed.
Yep.
And there were a lot of people that worked hard to get that done.
Yeah.
So credit where that's due for all the folks who made sure that happened.
So, I will say, I am not surprised, but I am still impressed. I think Hopkinton did a great job at lining up technology, at keeping things going, and keeping the community informed as we were going through this too.
Yeah.
It was just really impressive. So I'm just curious. Now, obviously, Delta is rising, and things are really different now. Over 90% of our community is vaccinated. We've had, or the scientists and doctors have had a year of data and tracking what works and what doesn't work. So with the current wave of Delta, which is higher in many other states, does it feel different to how things are happening for you?
Not too much. The thing is, it's nice that we are in a community that both has a high level of vaccination, as well as who tend to be very respectful of the people around them. We have a lot of people who come in wearing masks just in case there's someone who might not might have some kind of immune issues or anything like that, and a lot of us will wear them, especially if someone would feel more comfortable with it or anything like that. We always want to make sure that anyone who comes into town hall feels welcome there and feels safe there.
Right. So one quick question. So you really didn't go remote during the pandemic. Do you feel that you missed out?
No, I'll be honest. I never have been able to focus in a remote setting. I've tried, and even the days that I tried, because we were trying to make sure that we didn't get our office staffing too. You've seen our office; it's not huge.
Yeah.
So, it's tight. So we tried to make it so if someone had to get something done, so if my assistant really had to get into the office to get some stuff, then I would try to work remote that day.
Yeah.
It was just I could never get quite the same focus as I could when I was in the office.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm far too close to my refrigerator when I'm working remote. So when the world was shuttered and you were working, right? What did you do? Isn't a lot of your stuff dependent upon people getting you content and interacting with you? Or what was kind of the things that you were doing?
So there was no end to just prepping for elections, whether it be, I couldn't get my system to make sure that voters were registered and people who were moving away were removed from our lists, people who were deceased were removed from the lists. We could only do that right there in the office. We couldn't get a remote version of that system.
Yeah.
So we had to be in for that.
Yeah.
And there was early on a bunch of our programs, including dog licensing and everything else, that was all on a network and that we couldn't get access to.
I see.
which threw us for a loop at the beginning. And since then, we switched over to a web-based system for a whole bunch of our programs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helped significantly. And now we're kind of at that point, we're prepared if anything else were to happen like that, where we can continue operations, and it's allowed for remote working to actually be a possibility as well.
Right. Oh, so you switched over to a whole new system.
Yep. So our
How
dog
is it?
system is switched
good?
over. It's great, and it's going to give some new things for residents as well. We're hoping that we're going to launch the resident side of it in 21,
Mm-hmm.
or sorry, in 22 now, and that's going to allow for people to, instead of going and like paying and uploading and emailing out stuff separately for online transactions, they'll be able to do it all right here in this program for their dog licenses. Get everything renewed, sent over, and then it'll just be approved and assigned on our back end, and then mailed out just like normal.
I see. Hey, I was just mentioning in the last segment that I had seen an article from the last census that Hopkinton was the 7th fastest growing community in Massachusetts between the last two censuses. That 25% growth in the last 10 years. That's got to be a stressor for the town clerk.
It's definitely a unique challenge that we're looking at. Right now we're looking at we're weighing possibilities of whether it's going to be we're definitely getting additional precinct. That's happening.
Okay.
We don't know if we're going to be being told we have to get a 6th, or if we're going to decide that it's the best idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's going to be already pretty tight putting a 5th precinct into the Brown Gym, but a 6th I feel like would be a pretty hard swing. So we want to make sure that people can still vote in that one location, especially when we're dealing with precinct changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier if you go to the wrong precinct to be told just go to that line over there and you're all set.
Right.
Versus, oh, sorry, your voting location's on the other side of town.
Right.
So,
yeah. And also too, I mean, you know what? The precincts are lines on a map, right? The people are here, and they are going through, Brown Gym in order to vote. So I think that you must have had some accommodations as it was growing, seeing that it's happening.
Yeah, so there's all these, like you said, all these people have been there. The only difference now is we have to add more tables, we have to add more machines, and we have to add more workers.
Right, right.
But it's still all the same amount of people who are coming in to vote.
Mm.
And yeah, to your point, we've seen just such massive growth, and it's been, we've all seen the growing pains involved with it through the schools, through emergency services, but this is just more sign that Hopkinton's a pretty unique situation. It's, we're growing in the past 20 years. Each 10 years has been almost around 4,000 people adding on. That's just incredible amount of growth.
It really is. And speaking of unique situations, let's talk about the last town meeting or two. Oh man, I've never seen anything like that before, and I'm sure you haven't either.
Oh no, it was definitely probably the fastest town meetings I've ever been to. And then you add in the fact that we got, for that 2020 town meeting, we got absolutely fantastic weather. We got a beautiful day, so beautiful. We were worried that no one's going to come because it's so nice out today. And then you have the 2021 town meeting where we prepared for every weather scenario except for the one that we got, where it was just cold and windy and we were sitting in a wind tunnel.
Right, right.
But they were interesting challenges for sure.
And you know what? I'd like for you to just talk about that for a minute, because I don't think it's as easy as saying, well, we're just going to take everything that we do and then just plop it right outside, on the curb in front of the high school. There's got to be so much logistical effort and unique setup that has to go involved with that. Does that all just come upon you, or do you have resources or like guidance? How did that work?
I can say with 100% confidence there is zero chance that we would have been able to pull off either 2020 or 21 town meetings without the team that was helping me with it. A lot of logistics falls onto my office with it, just because between my office, the town manager, and the select board, that's where most of the the working to get town meeting up and running goes.
Okay.
But this ended up having to expand to, obviously, when we're dealing with health concerns, we have the health department who's there helping us. The fire department was there that was trying to make sure that all of our safety measures were taken into account, especially being outdoors on uneven ground in some places, and where chairs can go, what we need to do to make sure that the ground's not wet so that people don't slip or get hurt when they're at town meeting. I mean, they're all things that we were considering concerned for. There was a lot of effort that went in, even from the school side of it. They were amazing hosts, letting us take up their parking lots and their field. I mean, it was a big team effort, and then running power out to all these places and getting generators and tents and hundreds of chairs.
Right.
It's a whole process to be sure.
Yeah.
And I can't say that we were able to do it without our town accountant, Ben. He was absolutely fantastic in the procurement section of that and finding great deals on all of these things so that we could do this at minimal expense to the taxpayer if possible.
Yeah. Now, I would expect some of those expenses were offset by CARES Act funding.
Yeah, that did a lot.
Did you have like a budget, or did you have to go to Ben and say, this is what I need, and he made it work?
We had to, whenever we had something that was potentially going to be CARES Act eligible, we would basically do a write-up on it and say, here's what it is, here's why we think that it's an effect of COVID that we're paying for this, and then Ben would get it done. But it definitely wasn't here's the amount you have to spend on it, spend it at your will. It was well controlled. It was making sure we weren't doing anything inappropriately with it. It was all stuff that was unbudgeted and pandemic related.
Okay. Now, I do know from my side that there was a lot of effort put into streamlining the warrant, and kind of making it so that we didn't need to have a special town meeting that year and getting everything covered. Was there, if people who are interested look back on town meetings, will there be something different about this town meeting as far as the way the process worked, or how things were recorded or clumped together, or would the paper trail all look a lot like a normal town meeting?
A lot of it looks pretty much the same. The only difference is fewer in-person meetings, a lot more Zoom. In 2020, we were still really the height of it. It was that really red summer that we were dealing with, hot spots all over the place. And I mean, it worked out in that we were able to talk with boards, committees, petitioners, department heads to see about making sure that if there was something on the warrant that didn't need to get done right away, can we push it off a year?
Yeah.
And that was a huge saving grace for making sure that the 2020 town meeting went off quickly. We weren't out there and exposed for very long.
Yeah.
We got our business done, and then we moved on. And then for 21, we had put off all these things so that we could get them done in 21. So we still tried to say, we're going to make sure that we're not overdoing it. Don't put anything forward that we don't really need right now. But there's a lot of stuff that we asked people to put off for a year. So we wanted to be fair and give a chance to have those considered. And I think that it was really beneficial for us to have a chance to talk about them. And I think that for better or worse, the cold made the discussion move on a little bit faster.
Yes.
But I think ultimately we saw kind of a very similar trend in what we have seen, where we have town staff who give fantastic presentations on it with a lot of info. They answer questions, and then most of the things pass because there's been a lot of research into it. There's been a lot of work and legwork ahead of time. And then the things that just don't have the support of the community are the things that don't pass.
Yeah.
We also saw some fun procedural stuff at our 21 town meeting too, which some people were asking, what's going on here? And it's like, oh, this is the fun bit of if someone does a quorum call and all that. And we were short by about 14 or something at that point. And so then we had to see about if we could call everyone we knew to get them in so that we could get at least the stuff done that legally had to be done. because all the budget stuff that had to be done, and then there were a few other like budgetary related items that were on there that had to get done.
Yeah.
Or we'd end up facing fines and such as a town. So fortunately, we were able to get people back in.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioning that makes me think, especially with the growth that this town has experienced, that you must run up against people who've never had a town meeting because they come from a different form of local government and are like, what are you doing? What is this thing?
It's the most interesting thing to explain to someone who's from out of state, especially because they don't have anything like it if they're not from New England. I think the best description I've ever heard was someone say to me, it's like something straight out of a Stephen King novel. And it's, it's uniquely New England. I love to say that it's your chance to be a legislator for a day. You really get involved in all of the procedure and actually having a direct effect on how your government's run.
Yeah.
It's interesting to explain because I have had a lot of people who they have never had it before. And it's
So,
interesting to talk about it with them.
just out of curiosity, if town meeting is a Stephen King novel, who are you?
I'm the. That's a good question. I
You're
guess
the good guy.
Oh yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know because if it depends on if it's like the bad guys that are the ones running the whole thing. Then it's like oof.
So, what is the next one? I assume, are we having a special town meeting, or are we going for the next meeting will be the annual town meeting?
So there's no currently scheduled special town meetings or elections right now.
Okay.
The next time that people have to worry about a town meeting or a town election, as of right now at least, is going to be in May of 22.
Okay.
So that's going to be all we have on the docket right now.
Okay. Any planning going on for that? I know it's early days. I know, but
So now we're going to be starting to get into early budget season.
okay.
So we're going to be writing up budgets, making requests for CPC and CIC, and getting all that stuff sorted out, so that then when we come into the start of the new year, we can really hit the grindstone on refining the budget, getting warrant articles ready,
Yeah.
so that people will have the ability to look at an actual warrant relatively early in the spring.
Okay. And when do you start looking to think about where it might be held? How far in advance?
It probably will end up being, again, right around the start of the year.
Okay.
If not the end of the year is when we'll start looking at, based on how the world's looking at the time.
Right.
We'll look at, do we need to plan for this again to be in some sort of special location, or can we use the fact that a lot of things have relaxed to start to make the shift back?
Was there any type of special consideration from the state required for the last two town meetings?
So the only thing that the state really gave was they gave us the ability to move things around really quickly if need be, which we were able to do. And they also gave towns with representative town meeting the ability to do it entirely remotely.
Oh, okay.
But the difference there is that you don't need to. They're all recorded votes, so they can all do it through like a polling system that records their votes through Zoom or something like that. Versus, for us, your vote is just you saying aye or holding up a card, and otherwise it's not recorded how you voted. So it's not really as easy to pull something like that off anyway.
Right. So the only thing because I know there are a lot of meetings they allowed to be on Zoom during the pandemic, and I thought that the state just extended that a little while ago for like a long time.
Yep.
And the only impact that you had was that you need to be able to move things around really fast.
So that was the biggest one. Is like if we didn't know where it was going to happen or if there was going to be weather issues. We ran into a lot of that where, the past few town meetings we have not had on the normal days that we've had them. Same thing with our elections.
Excellent point, by the way. So what kind of feedback did you get from our Saturday?
Very mixed.
Really?
Because, and I've heard this already from talking with other towns that do Saturday town meetings, is they just see a shift in the demographics that show up.
Okay.
They don't see an increase in turnout, and I don't think we saw an increase in turnout, and part of that is potentially the weather. So I don't think you can really account for it being anything like that necessarily. It's not an exact correlation or anything, but you can look at it as that there are a lot of people who definitely don't want to waste their day off on it.
Right, right.
And same group of, there's plenty of people who don't want to have to go at dinner time to town meeting as well.
3-4 times a week.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think it's really hard to tell, and I think you see there's some people who they're diehard, who are going to go regardless, and there's some people who are definitely, they go because it's easier for them to go while they're already out, and they maybe already were at work that day, so they can just eat something and go into town meeting, versus they have to now get up and get out by 9 o'clock on a Saturday to go and go to town meeting for an undisclosed amount of time.
Right, right. I do think we talked about this just before the first one, that, you know, like, how can we even take that as a real marker of one way or the other? Because we were in the middle of it. Everybody was crushed. You know, we all were wearing the masks, and it just like was so different. Do you know, was there an increase between the 20 and 21? Because they were both outside, but 21, we had a lot different feeling in the community than we did from 20.
I think we saw probably a little bit more in 20, and partially just because I think everyone had been trapped inside for so long.
Okay.
They needed to get out of the house. And it was actually a really perfect day for it too. I mean, there was sun, but there was a tent. If you got there late, you didn't get to go into the tent, but it really wasn't like it was really oppressive heat or anything. It was warm. It was in the 70s. It was sunny. There was a light breeze. It was really a better day to be there than watching it from home even. Right. Versus some people, it's like they want to hunker down and just watch town meeting from home on a May evening town meeting. But then you also run into, when you do those outdoor meetings, when you do anything like that, you also run into weather issues and stuff like that. So, you know, and then you have a lot of town staff who are working way more hours than usual. I know that there were a lot of I saw a lot of tired faces around town hall come the few days before and few days after.
Right, right. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. I'm curious. I know that a position such as yours and a department such as yours, there's probably a lot of learning and communication that goes on. You know, like, I mean, I work with Google, and as soon as I know what they're doing, they change and there's something else. So I'm sure that, you know, you probably have a lot of that. I'm curious how things went over the pandemic as far as any kind of training or updates that you and your department would get. How did that go?
So it went well. I mean, election law is something that changes constantly, even if it's just regulations and how it works. It was really great that the state was able to offer training over the course of it through Zoom. That helped significantly. A lot of our normal conferences that we use to go over changing laws and to learn more about existing laws, those ended up being canceled because there was no way to hold them. And then we finally were able to go to one again in June because everyone was getting vaccinated and we were actually able to hold a live conference. But then over the course of it was the end of 2020, I also was able to go through and take a number of classes and exams and get my certification as a certified Massachusetts municipal clerk as well. So I haven't even put out a press release on that one yet. So you guys are the first to hear on that.
Boom. That's congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, that one requires a certain number of years of experience as a town clerk first, then all these other additional experience requirements to get all the points, plus an exam, which is fortunately a take-home exam.
Right. Oh, that's great. So you mentioned elections, and I think you mentioned during our time talking here that elections don't move for anybody. So has nothing changed? Like, no terms have been affected? The elections just happen when the elections happen?
Yep, and then the elections happen when the elections happen, and, you know, based on a given year, you're not going to say that someone was elected on May 16th in one year, and they're going to definitely be ending their term on May 16th, 3 years later.
Okay.
Because it's always been based on which day in May it is.
Mm-hmm.
So for town elections, the terms don't really change. Some people got a little extra time on there because we had to move things around to find a way to do it safely.
Yep.
But for local elections, everyone's terms otherwise just kept on rolling.
Okay.
And then for the federal elections, nothing moved. It was, we're getting it done regardless of what happens. And I still remember that very first one. It was right before everything started to close down, was the presidential primary. And that was when we first started to see everyone freaking out a little bit, and people were bringing their own pens because they didn't want to touch a pen that someone else might have been touching. They were looking for hand sanitizer like it was some sort of
Oh yeah.
elixir of life, and everything. And we were kind of sitting there like, geez, this is very different already. And then by the time that everything's over, within a week, everything's starting to shut down.
Yep. Yeah, that was crazy days,
Yep.
Connor. All right, that is the end of the amount of time that we have here, and it's been great catching up with you, and I'm looking forward to having you back on a regular
absolutely.
basis and keeping us updated on all the things that are going on.
Definitely. I missed being in the studio, so thanks for having me back again. This has been just an absolute treat.
Excellent. All right, thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you so much for watching this episode of the Hangout Hour. We are on Wednesday nights at 7 to 8, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Please take care, everybody. Bye-bye.